Appreciate it. Speaking of the family, several members of Peter's family have made the long trip from the East Coast to Alaska to be here today. I'd like to welcome each and to express the wishes of all of us that you will understand how much we treasured your brother and uncle, how much we appreciate that he came to live among us, and how much we loved and will miss him. I'd like to acknowledge Gloria McKay, Peter's sister from East Aurora, Barbara Gordon, Peter's sister from Atlanta with her husband Ron and son Glenn. Julia Rummel Smith, Peter's niece. Who told us a great story of Peter taking her over the Chilkoot Trail the other day, and she might be able to reprise it and might not today, but it was a great story. Peter's nephew, Patrick Rummel. And John Green. I should have reversed the order. Peter's oldest nephew, he pointed out to me, John Green. Peter's life, which was too short by decades, was nonetheless long enough for Peter to have accomplished so many things in so many fields and to have made so many deep friendships in so many places that it would take hours to catalog fully that splendid life. We don't have hours. So we've asked a handful of people who knew him well to tell us about the part that Peter played in their lives. We've asked people who went on this adventure, on his adventures, all over the globe, and people who worked with him in Alaska, and people who knew him as a friend, to tell us some stories. We'll take a break from the storytelling after a while to go outside and watch a row-by of people who rode with him using the same vessels that Peter rode and raise a toast to his memory at that time. Then we'll have some dinner, we'll have some additional speakers, and an open mic that will allow all that wish to share a recollection, a story, or a favorite episode with Peter to do so. There will be music and photo arrays and even some videos. So let's get started. I'm going to talk just briefly about my family and Peter. My family met Peter about 25 years ago when we were on what was for us a big adventure. We got in our sailboat and we sailed down to Marmion Island, and we're always careful to anchor up on the other side so you couldn't see Juneau, and we really felt like we were in the wilderness, and that was pretty cool. And in the morning, I got up and rode the dinghy ashore to give the dog a break, and I saw this guy camped on the side where you could see Juneau in a little tent, and he had a rowboat out there, and I thought, oh, that was cool, and we started talking. And at one point he said to me, so you coming in from Petersburg, Ketchikan? And I said, oh, no, we actually just, probably motored down from Juneau last night. How about you? Or, did you come down last night too? And he said, no, I'm on my way in from Sitka. And I subsequently discovered that was kind of a small trip for Peter, having rowed up here from Glacier Bay, but wow, did that make an impression on us. And we became friends and later near neighbors, and Peter came to play a huge role in the life of our family. He introduced us to the STP, the Seattle to Portland bike ride, and we considered ourselves bikers that time. We always went on bike vacations with our kids, and when he told us that it was Seattle to Portland in 2 days, or oh yeah, you could do it in 1 day if you wanted, we all thought he was crazy. And of course, Peter being Peter, that very next STP I found myself on a tandem with him trying to do it in 1 day. And that's just the kind of person that he was. He just got you to do stuff you never even dreamed you could do. And we didn't make it. We narrowly missed, but about a dozen years later, Annie and I tried it on our tandem, and we made it. And the only reason we made it was because Peter was driving our support car, and he basically tongue-lashed us the last 30 miles to get to the end. And I've forever been grateful for him for that. But not only the STP, he introduced us to the High Sierra camps, out of Tuolumne Meadows in Yosemite. I grew up in San Francisco, and I used to spend a lot of time in Yosemite, and I camped there. I even camped there in the winter, and I sort of felt like I knew what I was doing. And he suggested going to the High Sierra camps, and I said, I've done Yosemite quite a bit. And he said, have you, out of Tuolumne Meadows up high? And I said, well, no, mainly out of the Valley floor. And he goes, oh, no. You need to do real camping. You need to do real hiking. And Annie and I went with him to the High Sierra camps, and frankly, it was kind of like dude camping. It wasn't all that tough because they cooked the meals for you, and it was really nice. But it was definitely a notch above anything I'd ever done before. And that was all Peter. And he took our son Chris on the John Muir Trail in California and the Chilkoot Trail in Alaska. And he went with our daughter Mari, sailed across the North Atlantic with her, introduced her to his favorite spot in the world, west of Glacier Bay. Our family felt so blessed to have Peter as a friend and as a mentor and as an uncle to our children. I guess the last thing I wanted to say is through a random email this year, I learned that Peter was spending a month in Belgium and then coming back the same day that I was planning to go over to Italy and spend about a month there. And I talked him into just coming down to Italy and spending that time with me. I consider myself wildly lucky that I got to spend the month of March of 2014 with Peter in Italy. I thought I knew him well before that trip, but the breadth of his interests in music, in art, in history, in people, and the breadth of his talents that I learned about on that trip was truly stunning to me. And then I thought I knew him well the day that he died. But during the preparations for this program, listening to the stories of others, I learned more about the range of his accomplishments in life and the people that he touched and the adventures that he had. And put all together, it is just so hard to believe. I hope that this program today fills in, to some degree, the gaps in all of our knowledge about this remarkable human being. And so with that, I'd like to turn to the first speaker in our program today, Susan Fagrelius from Stillwater, Minnesota. Susan knew Peter long time, 42 years by her count, from her summers in East Aurora, New York. They were co-workers at the Roycroft Inn there. They were together for some years, and they formed an enduring and abiding love. Susan will talk about life lessons learned from Peter from a really interesting perspective, largely from letters that he wrote to her. Susan?
Wow. This is quite a gathering and quite a group. I'm looking out at a sea of faces, and I know that each one of you loves Peter. I'm not going to say loved, because I know that he's here. He's just here in a different form, and we're going to find out more about that as the day goes on. What I'm calling this piece is Living Large, Living Full On. Peter, this man that we all love, lived in large measure by self-discovered imperatives, and he distilled them to their essence from his lived experience. So the first one was, I think you'll all agree, be free, break out, live full on, be free, first in your spirit and let it fly, play, check out the art scene, the music scene, the shoulds, ought tos. No to shoulds and ought tos. Conform to what? Who says a signature has to be readable? Who says I have to dress all formal for a concert with the Buffalo Philharmonic? I don't have time to change, so I'll get my jacket, my tie, and my shorts, and hide behind my bass. And speaking of basses, in 1993, he writes, last year I played chamber music with a group of mixed-up players. We had fun, and then I had to give them back the bass. Peter loved the vast variety of human expression through the arts and lived poetry of life. He had an eye for the extraordinary, for the beautiful, for what was limitless, and for what was lived in all possibility. I think that's actually where he spent a lot of his life, in all possibility. And he wrote one night, tonight it seemed possible. He looked at the sky again. What was left of the sunset was covered in a haze of fog. The sky was on fire. Let's see here. The setting sun became flames behind a curtain of gray. The dark clouds were ashes and smoke. And so his spirit was and is most alive in nature. Most of you know that in such unique and extraordinary ways over his lifetime. The second was this: be present. No, really. Be present. True presence is the doorway to relationships, to love, to knowing the grand mystery that life is. So go there, be present. And this was the way of his being. Many of you have spoken about the experience of being Peter's best friend. And apparently he had many. All of you. And you know what that was about powerful connection, and that he knew the power of that kind of connection. The experience of being the only one in his presence. That he cared about you, just you, in that moment. And he knew that presence mattered. I heard some stories of his work with indigenous people and in conferences, and it's like, no, you go sit with people. You learn about them. You be with them. You understand their lives. And then we can talk business. Over the years, he taught himself how to be, just be, amid all the doing. He wrote from the Shambhala Mountain Center in Colorado of his journey to practice, learning to sit, to breathe, to let thoughts go. To be in his breath was to be in his life. He did a deep dive into Buddhist practice and worked with this ancient wisdom for many, many years. I think it really added to his presence and his understanding of what that was. So the third thing was, his message was, ride those waves. Know the tides. Watch the currents. And expect the unexpected. So, you know, he was a meticulous planner. I remember being out in Gustavus. He goes, Susan, do an inventory of all this shit I have, all the food shit I have that are in the boxes. And so, okay, so I'm like, for an hour, I'm working on the meticulous, inventory, and and then. So then we get on the ferry, and he goes, where's the inventory? I go, oh, I thought you wanted me to leave it in the container. And he goes, oh my God. Anyways. But, so there was a way that he, well, that was an unexpected message for me, but anyway, he dealt with it. So in this message about, riding, paying attention to the tides and riding the waves, we all know of Peter's love for water. He developed an adventure compact, I swear it, I know it, with water from his childhood when he roamed the shale creeks near his home. And by the way, he set his trap lines there as well. Happened to be on my family's land. So he knew that land as well as I did. And we could tell all the most ancient trees, we both knew them. And Dick can tell you about his relationship with water from their 1,000-mile journey from Seattle to Glacier Bay, but you'll hear about that in a little bit. And so many of you rode the waves with him literally and figuratively. And if you could catch the power of the wave, you could go far easy, just easy. And then there was an occasional big one. So he writes one day, and I have no idea what trip this was from, so if any of you have an idea, let me know. I was out on a boat tour for a couple of weeks, was blown off the water a couple of times, and eventually turned back. It was beautiful out there. So he also learned this lesson of riding the waves metaphorically. Just as water can be calm or turbulent, so can the waters of emotion. And Peter worked with moving the energy of his emotion over his lifetime. Personally, I've watched that, I've witnessed it, I've been a part of it, and I honor his growth in this territory of his life. And one time he wrote to me, "I'm never quite able to express in words the feelings and thoughts I have. I have always felt so much pressure about that. It is quite frustrating, the thought that I don't express myself, and I have to fight not to give up completely." So he fought, he did, over all those years and through the many kinds of structural challenges that were a part of his life makeup. He had some dark emotional times and also times of intense happiness. And he wrote this is just stunning. I read this again last night, and he said, "I was with 3 Eskimos ice fishing a few weeks ago. It was -20 and the moon nearly full. Dark, late, the wind blowing miles from the village, and we worked silently, chopping holes, pulling net, and an intense happiness came over me. I felt I could just walk off. And today, another moment of bliss came over me. I am preparing for solstice, looking for the turn back to the light." So he chose to learn to be with emotion and to feel it over his lifetime, and he chose growth, personal growth that fed his life. The fourth one is be on deck and on the radio. Stay the course. Another water and boat metaphor. Remember the picture from "I'd swamp my old skidoo for you"? Nan, you know that one, all right? So there's a picture of him in there from Destination Glacier Bay, where Peter is standing stranded, and he's hung up at low tide, misjudged that one, with that big radio with a freaking tall antenna going up like this. And so he was like that. He was really tuned in. And again, literally and metaphorically, figuratively. He writes this one, and it is kind of about that thing about tuning in because you would have had to stay really, really focused to get through this experience. So he writes, "After securing the boat a new home in Sitka, I checked email and found a note from a friend setting out to help move materials into Tasahara for the summer. Remember that place? Yeah, in the mountains, the Monterey Carmel Mountains in California. So I flew down to San Jose and drove out to Carmel Valley and found my friend was out in Salinas getting trucks loaded with wood and cement. I went there and I was drafted into driving a rig out of the Salinas Valley, a 10-ton Rio with double axles." Okay, we got the picture, right? So let's see, I was drafted in a driving rig out of Salinas Valley and up into the Tasahara Gorge. I had a Buddhist volunteer with me. Interesting thread. I had a Buddhist volunteer with me who thought I knew what I was doing. I didn't tell her until the day after we arrived in Tasahara that I hadn't driven a truck like that since I was 16. I'm asking to myself, what truck was that, Peter? Anyways, with breakdowns, the caravan of 3 trucks took 3 days for a 5-hour trip. It all seemed perfect anyways. The trip down the mountain was a thriller. Good. He liked adrenaline, I think. And I felt I faced our death several times. But I think I was just bumping up against fear. And that was part of how he lived his purpose and knew where he was going. He just knew how to stay on course in the most extraordinary circumstances with his life. The next little command about how to live life is do what sustains life. So I laughed last night when I read this. He goes, quote, I'm rowing next week to Admiralty Island. Mission, scare the brown bears back up into the woods to spoil the bear hunting. That trickster, there he was, at it again. He has always had sort of this spyglass view to zoom in and zoom out and stay focused on what was important. And he really cared about what is life-giving anyways. What is it that sustains life in this moment? He had a variety of things that he would rant about. I think you all know what they are, the expanse of politics and global corporate endeavors and his worries about the land and waters and animals that he cared so deeply about. He really cared about sustaining life. So the next one was, gotta keep dreaming our dreams, and that was a quote out of one of his letters. I don't know which one anymore, but so he knew, actually Peter was one of those people on the planet that knew what it meant to hold a dream, to have it, to be able to envision it clearly, to see all the things that he would need to manifest to make it real. And he did that, as you know, with just extraordinary aplomb, really. Whether it had to be about manifesting a place to live, or the people that he wanted to be with, or the next adventure. And he writes, quote, I managed not to work for 4 months this year. How did you do that, Peter? I think he dreamed it. And it is getting harder to take saving the state of Alaska seriously. You might ask, why did it take him so long to retire, for crying out loud? Anyways, he was dreaming up his retirement with that 4-month interval. So he says, this is quite fun, I'm moving this weekend. So this is about manifesting a place that he could live. And he says, I'm moving this weekend, carrying my life in boxes. First move in 14 years. Wow, a lot of stuff to dump. Old clothes that fit once again. Letters, odd pieces of gear, hunks of stuff. I sold off a lot of furniture. The new place had some. It is the best place in town, and I'm looking forward to getting into my new home. I have, and this is in italics, a widow's walk upstairs. Hi, Bill, where are you? That I will use to spot the spring whales coming up the channel. And later, quote, I am so happy to be living in my new pad and neighborhood. I think I have to find some new obsessions as boating gets less interesting all the time. So who knows what those new obsessions were? Probably some of you do. He also made an interesting comment that he was dreaming for a number of years, actually, of a place he could come and, quote, rest along my way. And he wondered, would it be in Galicia? Would it be in the Shetland Islands? And several other places. But no, it was in Gustavus. The seventh one was act. Act with courage. Move from the heart and speak the truth. So, courage. You know, that word is like courage in French means rage of the heart. And so how ironic, you know, that Peter physically, that his heart gave out. Look at that. So, You're getting me all distracted, Scott. Yeah, be present. So, you know, as we've heard, and so many of you know because you lived with, you know, in this community with him for so long, that he lived with epic courage, even dangerously, of course, but always full on. Through his heart, he loved, just deeply loved the people that he knew and the animals. His dog in the early days, Tahoe, an Irish setter, that was friends with my dog, Kasumbo, and he loved his friends' dogs, and he loved the ranch dogs, and he loved all those sheep on the LaFelt Ranch, and he just loved the otters and the seals in the straits, icy straits. And anywhere he was. He took a lesson from the bears about how to step into courage and claim your own territory at the same time. Yeah, the idea was walk towards that sucker, that big brown bear. Just walk toward it, claim your own place. And so we're just wondering, were you being courageous, Peter, or were you being kind of dumb? As I reflect on Peter's life for the 4 decades that I knew him, I think that this was perhaps his biggest gift, the expanse of his heart, and how he came to love this life and the people in it in so many ways. He said once, it was truth. It was love. And I don't know the context for that, but it seems like it's relevant to so many things. So the last thing was, live like the lightning bolt. Transform yourself. So he had this idea, you know, and he was right about this, that we all have to choose how to live our own lives. Every moment it's a choice in our own selves about how to live our lives. And he would just say, only you can live your life. You know, so transform yourself from the inside and your life will be amazing. I think that I learned that he told me this once, that he thought that he learned that life is light and life is love. It's all love. And so I'll just end with this story that I told some of you yesterday. But after Peter had a stent put in his heart, which I didn't know at the moment, it was in that period of time, and I awakened out of a dream at 4:24 in the morning, and the dream was of Peter walking in golden light, in radiance, out of a cloud of radiant light. And he said, I'm okay. I'm okay. And so I got up right away and I wrote him an email and I said, okay, this is my dream. Are you okay? And so he wrote an email back to me and he said, well, at the exact moment that you wrote, that you had that dream, that you woke from that dream, I was coming out of anesthetic. I believe, you could verify this, Nicole or anybody, but I believe it was after he had the stent put in, and he was coming out of anesthetic, and he was speaking my name, and the nurse said, who's Susan? And so he had a few words to say about the nature of. I think one of the ways that Peter lived was that he was actually. We've all experienced coincidences with him, and this was one of the ways that one of his gifts was to communicate that way. So I just wanted you all to know that I believe that that's actually true now as well, is that he wants us all to know, I'm okay. I've spoken.
Thank you, Susan, for that glimpse, really literally, into Peter's heart through his words. The next speaker might be called, certainly by those of us up here, as the man who started it all, because as Dick Luxon describes himself, quote, "I'm the guy who dragged his sorry butt all the way up here." Dick was the rowing partner of Peter on the epic journey from Seattle to Glacier Bay. Dick Luxon?
You? I'm the dude that rode with the dude. Oh, okay. Anyhow, this all started a long time ago, and you know what they tell you about getting older. Can't see, can't hear, and can't remember. So this is going to be a little bit vague. But I do remember we had a lot of fun, and I'm going to skip my notes and just tell a few little stories about the trip and the fun we had, and try to make this lighter than... I don't want to break out in tears. That's my main concern. But anyhow, on this trip, on one occasion, we stopped on a beach. We thought we were way above the high tide line because we were in grass. We set up camp, cooked dinner, exhausted, went in the tent for the night. In the middle of the night, Peter wakes me up and he said, "Dick, the tent's floating." And I said, "What the hell are you talking about?" He said, "We're not touching the bottom." And I start putting my elbows down and try to sit up, and you can't sit up when it's like a water bed that's got not enough water in it, right? So I remember I'm thinking, uh-oh, this ain't good. And we kind of unzip the little zipper and look out the hole there, and it's a little quiet bay with dead calm water and a little mist on the water. And I'm looking around and I see plates and a frying pan floating by, and I'm thinking, oh, this is surreal. What am I thinking here? And we start thinking, now, can we get out of the tent? And finally Peter said, "I'm getting out. You stay in the tent," because that kept it was like a keel on a sailboat. I was the weight that held it upright. So he walked around on the bay in water up to his chest, gathering what he could, brought it to the tent and handed it to me. Then he pulled the tent to shore. We get everything out and dry everything off and try to figure out what to do, and we realize half of our cooking utensils and everything have disappeared in the water. Our flashlights that had been sitting there, any kind of equipment that was small and sitting outside disappeared. And but it was just another thing we had to deal with, and we were still having fun. So it wasn't like it was a big deal. It wasn't dangerous, but it was like kind of weird. And another time, after we'd been rowing all day in a warm, balmy, sunny day on dead flat water, Peter was in the bow, so he's looking at the back of my head all day. And I'm rowing along, and apparently I fell asleep rowing. And Peter yelled at me, or made a real loud, "Hey!" And I jumped up, says, "Would you fall asleep?" And I said, "Why, hell no, what are you thinking?" Of course I had fallen asleep, but it was just weird little things like that. It makes it interesting and kind of fun, and who knows what all else. But anyhow, it was all good times and good memories, and for Peter it certainly began, or it wasn't the beginning of his career of adventures, but it was one of his early big adventures that led to many, many, many more. And he became my mentor, and in the sense that he was doing more adventures than I ever dreamed of doing after a while, and I did a lot with him after a while. And I think somebody mentioned a trip to Sitka. He and I did a row from Sitka that got rained out, and we got about 30 miles from Sitka and turned around and went back. And then we had to ship the boat to Juneau on the ferry, and we got home on a Friday night. I remember we got up on Saturday morning and found out there was a bicycle club 100K race event here we grabbed 2 of his bikes and rode 100K on Saturday morning after we had gotten home the night before. So you never knew what to expect, but it was always fun. So anyhow, eventually he used to come down to Santa Cruz quite regularly, and my son got to be a big fan of Peter's. And when my son graduated from high school, Peter invited us up here for a little snowboard trip to Eagle Crest, and we came up here and stayed, and I mean, this was like a monumental experience for my son, and we just had so much fun, and he became such a fan of Peter's, and it was basically the beginning of his adventure career. And like, you know, a month from today, actually, he's going to do a Mount Whitney hike and climb, and I'm sure Peter will be with him. And now I'm going to get teary-eyed, but anyhow, every day in a row I think of Peter, and it's going to be tough, take some time, but we'll get over these things. Anyhow, I got to go. Whoa, this is too hard.
Thank you, Dick, and all kidding aside, thank you for bringing Peter to us. Our next speaker is Dick Farnell. Dick Farnell knew Peter for just about all of the time that Peter was in Alaska and shared many boats, tents, and trails with Peter during that time. Dick?
I'm not under pressure or anything. Well, I just wanted to say it's just incredible. I mean, I can't even see the end of all the people that are here sharing this experience and that were touched by Peter's life, just like I was. And so I'm glad I'm sharing this all with you guys. I just want to start out with how I first met Peter, because that was quite an experience, probably just like most of you guys have too. Many that it would have been in Seattle in 1981, and that looks like my twin brother. Or maybe it's, the eyes are kind of big, so it's probably somebody saying, there's water coming into the boat. Because that is on my old boat there. Anyway, I first met Peter in Seattle in 1981. He was working for REI at the time. We were introduced by a mutual friend. And right out of the chute, I go, unforgettable character, this guy's incredible. First, because of his handshake, which was the strongest handshake I've ever felt. But then, probably some of the things that Susan had mentioned, powerful aura, kind of a guy in control, confidence, just in a few moments. I realized that this guy was somebody special, and as it turned out at that time, both of us were just a few weeks away from leaving Seattle for the great frontier, the last frontier of Alaska. He was going to the bush in Antioch. I was coming here to Juneau. And so, boom, there, it was a friendship of about a month or something, month and a half, and boom, it's gone. But amazingly, we stayed in touch with ancient technology back then, letters, maybe one or two phone calls, because that was in the days before internet and whatever the heck else they got now. I'm too old-fashioned to pick up on that. But eventually, Peter, a couple years later, moved to Juneau, and boy, our relationship really took off then in terms of adventure, in terms of city life. He got me off of my sailboat onto land where I belonged, but then we really started doing adventure trips. To mention all of them would take, like Bud was saying, probably days instead of many hours. But a few of them, some of the big ones just stand out. Around Admiralty Island, which Susan mentioned, and it was going to be just like she said, only you'll find out in a second what that means. But anyway, around Admiralty Island, around Baranoff Island, these are major expeditions for small craft and people that are kind of feeling their way. Around Admiralty, around Baranoff, and then from Sitka to Glacier Bay, Sitka to Juneau, two trips along the outside and then coming back in. But anyway, as must be about the same trip that Peter must have written Susan about going over to Admiralty Island, save the bears. As you guys will see from this little description here of one incident that we had. Peter was and his wife Serena were rowing their two-station St. Lawrence River skiff, and I was paddling my kayak. We were in Seymour Canal, southbound. It was late in the day. We were scouting for a campsite, and a sand spit or a spit of land kind of appeared in front of us, and so we decided to check this out for campsites. I volunteered to check the near shore. Peter and Serena were going to go around the point of it and check the far shore for suitable sites. And so I got out of my boat and checked that shore. Nothing remarkable. So I walked up over the top of the spit of land to rendezvous with them on the far side, and then all of a sudden, you know what it's like when you see a bear. You stop thinking, froze. You're helpless. You're just a hunk of meat waiting for somebody to chew into it because you can't think anymore. And in the words of Peter McKay, he would have called that "you're trapped like a rat." So I'm standing there motionless, just don't even know what to do because the thing's about 20 feet away, giving me that "what do you want" look, and all of a sudden the huge, tremendous blast of Freon air horn breaks the silence. The bear does a complete 180, runs up the beach, right into the trees, just like Susan, wherever you are, just like he said he was going to do. Only I didn't know he was going to be using me as bait. But bear disappears, and here comes Peter and Serena rounding the point. I look over, and Peter's got an air horn in one hand, the tiller of the boat in the other hand, and it was so typical Peter, the right tool in the right place at the right time to come and rescue me from that potential bad situation. I guess don't have too much more on that because that was one of the highlights for me with Peter, but among other countless adventures. But having time to reflect, I realized that it's that and many, many, many other associations and adventures with Peter, both in the city and out on the water. He had a lasting effect on me and shaped a large part of my image of myself, and for that I'm very grateful, truly grateful. And in tribute to Peter, I would just like to mention a short line from my some of you who have seen this monumental must-see movie that explains everything about life. Peter, you're a good man in a tight corner. Maybe some of you people might remember when that line came in the movie. Anyway, Peter, I'll miss you very much. Thank you for everything.
Thank you, Dick. Peter loved to take people to the next level in whatever their endeavor was. I'm thinking Nicole, for example, casual bicyclist being taken to a RAGBRAI participant, the registers annual Great Bicycle Ride across Iowa. That's a big step up. Or maybe Mari Carpenetti, local sailor to transatlantic voyager. Well, our next adventure, Carla Hart, will tell how a Juneau girl who had done a little rowing in the Channel found herself out in big water in lower Chatham Strait across from Cape Amity. I think Peter had something to do with it. Carla?
Thanks. I met Peter through Jeff and Teresa and a love of adventure. And Peter had in mind this trip to Coronation Island, but Peter liked to keep his places sort of secret at the same time he liked to share them. So I was sort of sworn to secrecy. We were planning this trip to Coronation Island, and it was a really special place, and nobody should know about it. At the same time that Peter, because this was pre-Google Earth and all of that, Peter managed to convince an Alaska Airlines pilot to defer a little bit from Sitka to Ketchikan so that he could get a flyby to check out our route before we went. So I had never done anything beyond, I grew up on the water in Juneau, so I'd rowed and kayaked all my life, but I'd never done a big adventure, and that had always been a dream of mine. So we set off from Cake and went down through Rocky Pass and down around the south end of QU and got out to Coronation Island quite well. And then the weather kicked up and we were weathered in on Coronation Island for 10 days. And that was before you had any satellite or anything, any spot to say I'm fine. And we had set up that we would contact through a marine operator periodically, a friend in Juneau, and that was our only human contact. We weren't wanting to do a lot of stuff, but we couldn't even pick up the marine weather in Egg Harbor where we were on Coronation Island. So basically every morning I would get up and walk out to the point and see what it looked like. And we were in beautiful, calm water in this sheltered bay, but it was screaming outside. And I thought Coronation was so remote because in the 10 days we were there, 2 boats came in was all. But it turns out that the entire Sitka fishing fleet was in the harbor because it really was bad weather that spring. So when we finally got a chance to go, it was pretty harried, and we were trying to sail a bit heading back over to the Spanish Islands. And I don't know anything about sailing, but we were sailing, and however Peter's boat worked, something important wooden broke on the whole sailing apparatus. Sort of a screaming winds, and I was hanging on for dear life trying to keep things together, and I'm not sure what Peter was doing because all I was doing was hanging on for dear life. We made it through that, and then the next day, I think, this was all sort of vague and I don't journal, we were rowing up from Spanish Islands up QU and got into some really big water, and I knew it was big and I knew I was scared, but I wasn't too scared because I really trusted the boat and I trusted Peter, and we just kept going because there was no choice. And ultimately we found a bay that we could get into and out of the weather. There was no place to camp. We almost replicated Dick's. The water was lapping at our tent, but we didn't float away. And it wasn't until quite a few years after that, when Peter gave a presentation to the Juneau Rowing Club, that I learned that those were the biggest waves that he'd ever been in. So I figured Latuya Bay, I mean, he's done everything. So I had great comfort in knowing that he knew what we were doing. So he was a great adventurer, and as I was packing things, trying to get ready for today, I felt like, a little bit like I was packing for another expedition. So, thanks.
Thanks, Carla. I guess it was nice to learn after the fact how... Our next speaker is Jeff Sauer. Jeff, Peter's friend and lawyer, has spent a lot of time with Peter on the water, on bicycles, in camps, all over the place. Jeff?
Good evening. I was privileged to call Peter McKay a good friend, like so many of us in this room. For me, it was over 25 years. I first met Peter McKay through another character in this book. There's books full of characters, but Lori Berg. It was Lori Berg and Gloria Lamuth. And I was living in Sitka at the time, but spending a lot of time in Juneau. And I met them, and they were doing kayak trips and beach fires and such. And I met Peter through them and struck up a friendship with him. And not long after that, I found myself invited to go on a trip with Peter down the Stikine River. And the Stikine was one of the places that Peter really loved in Alaska, and this would be his first trip on the river. He would, after that, do at least another 2 or 3 more trips down that river, and talked many times about doing the river again and again. The trip was with Peter and his partner, and Dick Farnell, who was really Peter's bosom buddy. Dick Farnell and Peter were really the best of buddies. And it was Dick and his partner and myself. It was 3 boats. They were folding kayaks. We flew from Juneau on a small plane on wheels into Telegraph Creek up in British Columbia, assembled our 3 folding kayaks and started down the river. And we were lucky to get glorious weather and just a marvelous trip. And we were out a day or so in this kind of weather, and we spent a little afternoon on the side in a nice beach, and Peter was, I'm not sure how this happened, but I'm sure Peter had something to do with it, but most of us ended up naked on the side of the beach and swimming in the water. And here comes the pretty good story. And it was at this point that we could call the story how Peter McKay introduced Jeff Sauer to Phil Moritz. And I'll bring Phil up here for just a second. So we're all standing on the beach and naked, most of us, and you know, we're in the middle of nowhere, right? We're not expecting any boat traffic at all. It's 1987. There's no book on the river. Some people are doing it, but not many.
Well, anyway, my perspective was slightly different. I brought a young thing up with me and convinced her, who she'd never been outdoors, that this was an easy river. Riverboats went up and down, and it was no problem, and she wouldn't have any trouble, but she was very apprehensive. And so we have a last meal, proverbial, I guess, at the Windsong Lodge, and the woman that runs the lodge says, "Oh my God, you're the only 2 people on the river, and the last person died." So anyway, I erected this klepper, also coming in on wheels from Juneau, and so, you know, I told her, well, you know, you'd be lucky to even see a bear. So we get into the first standing water out of Telegraph Creek, and there on the left shore is a very large brown bear just staring at us. And, oh God, she knows I'm lying now. Well, anyway, I go around the corner, and then there's 5 people bare-ass naked. Well, my only perspective was, you know, unfortunately I seem to know these people, other than Jeff, but they all had tops on, no pants. And so I was trying to talk to them, but I was only trying to look up. I was like, I don't notice what's going on here. And Jeff, the rest is yours.
Okay. Why don't you put me back on? So this is a slide of Peter right at that spot in 1987. Yeah, he's got his pants on at this point. So anyway, they all knew Phil Moritz, but I didn't. So I think Peter loved that. This is how he introduced me to Phil Moritz in the middle of nowhere, buck naked. So I'll show a couple. So we dug for slides and found a couple here, and these are kind of, well, I'll throw them up here. That's and there's Peter. Peter's in the middle here with a camera. So I don't know. At some point, here comes this other boat down the river. It's like, what the hell is that? So it's Phil Moritz. So that's how I met Phil Moritz. Okay. So our 3-boat trip turned into 4. It was a great adventure, a very remote place. And one thing is that, you know, plenty of brown bears just all over the place, and footprints the size of your head just everywhere. Hard to even put a tent down without putting your tent on top of brown bear prints, which was a little bit intimidating. But and so those were the kind of places that Peter really loved. Another remote place full of lots and lots of bears was Taylor Bay in Glacier Bay National Park. And I looked at some of the dates here, 87 on the Stikine River. Almost exactly 20 years later, I would do a trip. My wife, Teresa Svankera, and me would do a trip with Peter out to Taylor Bay, one of his favorite camping spots, a place that he wouldn't tell anybody about, of course, because these were secret places. Anyway, we went out there, had a great time, beautiful area, but another place just littered with brown bears and just walking all over. And a really neat place. And out there we had a great experience. We were out in the middle of a huge field, and off in the distance was a black wolf. And the wolf ended up coming a mile or so, trotting up to us. It obviously did not know what human beings were, came right up to us within 40 feet, circled all the way around us, the 3 of us, and was trying to get our scent to determine what in the world we were. And once it did that, it just sort of trotted off. And so that was another amazing trip with Peter. As I think everybody knows here, Peter was quite the planner, planning these trips for long times, packing for weeks, and he was also quite the gear hound. You know, he had quite the style, the panache. And he had the gear. He had his berets. He had that North Face VE24 dome tent. I mean, he was just known for that. He had his own particular rubber boots that you'll see right there that he had on. He had his ICOM radios, his carabiners, his plastic buckets with screw-top lids. He really liked those. And of course, lots of food he would take on these trips. And for instance, out to Taylor Bay, he'd have these massive sealed cans of butter. And that was Peter. A couple other things. I said I was living in Sitka and playing in Juneau some. I moved to Juneau in 1988 from Sitka. And Peter was one of those people that would just go out of his way to help friends, just a very kind person. And he went out of his way to find me an apartment. Back in the day, the state apartments, Larry Knudsen owned those apartments. And Larry Larry was just a great soul. He's also gone now. And Peter thought the world of him. And in the dorm was Dick Fardell, Peter's best buddy. And then I moved in, and there's been many people in this room and in Juneau that have gone through what would become nicknamed the dorm, because it really was like a college dorm, because people would socialize so much and go from room to room just visiting. So that was the dorm, and I moved there in '88. And another trip. Well, let me say, there would be lots and lots of trips from then on. And those trips, a lot of the trips were basically simple trips, weekend trips, lots of camping trips with Peter and Nicole, and also with Teresa and my wife, and many times with dogs. And I'm sure some people will talk here about Peter's relationships with his dog friends. He had many, many dog friends. I think many of you know about Max, and now there's Meg. There was a couple Kiskas that he loved, and so he had all his dog friends, and sometimes they would be along. But we'd have these simple little trips, either by backpacking or by some boat of some sort. And they would be to just these exotic, beautiful places. And, we should all be very lucky to have these places that are so close to us. And they're just outrageous, world-class spots that we have, these little beaches and stuff where you can camp. So we did quite a bit of that. And I wanted to talk about one other very big trip, and that was that Peter, I got invited to go to New Zealand with Peter and his partner on a bicycling trip, and it was in 1988. We would spend some 5 weeks in New Zealand bicycling a great deal of the South Island, and back then the South Island was just a marvelous place. It was unpopulated. There were more bicycles than cars there, and we just had a really good time cycling that island. This is a picture of Peter here in New Zealand at that time with his arm around Sir Edmund Hillary, and there's a statue there, and you can't quite see it, but Peter's got his ball cap on top of Sir Edmund Hillary. And the signs up here, up in the upper left, are one's to the distance to Mount Everest, and the other one's a distance to the North Pole and a distance to the South Pole. And I just looked this up on the internet. It turns out that Sir Edmund Hillary was not only the first human on top of Mount Everest, he was the first human to be all three places, the South Pole, the North Pole, and the top of Mount Everest. So that certainly fit Peter quite well. Peter had this, as we all know, had this tremendous adventurous spirit, just a real keen interest in exploring and wanting the whole experience, not just the good, but everything. The raw wilderness, the rain, the dirt, the sweat, the whole enchilada. And also involved in that was a certain amount of risk, and there were calculated risks, and they were involved, and that was all part of it. And he reveled in that. He reveled in experienced the good and the bad, and the storm descending upon us, and he was just so positive. I learned a phrase a couple years ago on a trip that I wasn't with Peter on. I was with some other folks from Juneau, and with Teresa, with my wife. We were in the Channel Islands in Southern California on a tall ship, and on that ship one evening some folks said, "Oh, we're going into this bay, and we're going to swim the snorkel in the bioluminescence late at night." And so I'm sitting there listening to this. I'm going, "Whoa, that water's really cold." And I said, "Wow, it's actually damn cold in California, like it is here." And so I said something like, "Wow, I'm not sure if I'm up for that, swimming in such cold water late at night." And the person there made this comment, which was "Cold is temporary, glory is forever." And I think that epitomizes Peter. That epitomizes Peter and his adventurous spirit. He was a great man, a wonderful friend, and a great adventurer. Goodbye, Peter McKay. We're going to miss you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. One of the prerogatives of holding the microphone in this position, I guess, is to make tweaks in the schedule. And one of the things that we were going to do today, I mentioned earlier, was have a row by, and I'm informed that the rowers have been patiently waiting outside. So although there was a possibility of having one or maybe two more speakers at this time, I'm going to ask them to wait till the next segment so that we can go outside. The drill here is to go out the doors here. We've got beverages ready for the toast. I can tell you that the folks that are in the boats, are the following: Jim Thompson, Dick Luxon, and Bill Spear, as well as Mari Carpenetti, all of whom have accompanied Peter on rowing adventures of one kind or another. The large boat was Peter's for many years, and the 2 single boats belonged to Bill Spear. All of the boats are Grand Banks dories and were built at the Aeolus Boat Building in Davenport, California. Peter loved that place and had a very close relationship with the man who built the boats. Peter stayed in touch with his wife many years after he died. It is there at the boat building shop that the Peter McKay bench resided. 3 of us will ride in the boats to distribute the wreaths on the water, and those are Joanna Goldman, Susan Fergalius, and Donna Fearley, 3 women who loved him. So if you could grab a wrap if you need, head out the door here, and we'll have this little toast to Peter outside and the row by. Thank you.
Have a toast to Peter at this time. I'd ask you to raise your glasses. We lift our glasses to Peter, void in the natural world, but walks gently in it, who works to make the lives of others better, pushed us to be our best, and who did it all with grace and wit and compassion and strength and love. We love you, Peter. You're here.
Could I have your attention just for 1 second, everyone? Just for 1 second, if I could have your attention, I'd appreciate it. Just so you know what the plan is. Well, a couple of things. There's a lot of photographs, extra photographs of Peter, and Scott Hurlburt would like me to announce that if anybody's going to leave after dinner and before we get going again, please look at the photos and feel free to take any that you like. There's lots of copies of them, and we thought it would be a nice way of having a remembrance. So that's the first thing. The second thing is we're thinking that we'll be able to get started again in about 25 minutes. There's a couple more speakers, and then there'll be a chance for an open mic. And among those speakers will be people that are showing video and audio. So that'll be starting in about 25 minutes. But if you're going to leave before that, Joe Geltoff, please listen here. Joe Geltoff, I'm talking to you. Can I have your attention just so we can finish this? If you're going to leave early, please look at those photos and take some with you. We'll be starting again in about 25 minutes. Nancy.
Hey, but what about the book signing? The family would really love the book to be signed.
Okay, I'm reminded the family would really like the book to be signed. And it's currently in the postcard room. The one that says in the postcard room, it's got a sticker on it and it says family copy. So the family would really appreciate it if you could sign that. And thank you, Joe. I appreciate your attention. Thanks, everyone. Before, and I was asked to make just a couple of announcements before we start. The first of which is this: there's a lot of salmon that's left over, and so the fabulous kitchen crew is going to be putting it on plates with some sort of aluminum wrapper and putting it in the refrigerator now, so it'll be cool. So if you'd like to take some salmon with you when you go, please think about doing that. I need to do something here more. Let's see. I need a glass. Yeah. Annie Carpinetti, could I have your attention? We're starting the program here. You and Leah have to sit down. Joe Geldof also has to sit down right now, because we're not going to get this thing started unless people can hear our speakers. Hello, you folks at the door there. Don't make me call you out by name. Thank you, folks. I don't know if you could hear that announcement. There's a lot of salmon. If you'd like some salmon, it'll be put out to take. Also, repeating the announcement about the photos. Before you leave, please look through the photos and take those that appeal to you. Okay, we didn't quite finish the first program. We've got a couple more folks who were recruited to talk about Phil.
You know how to treat a man like you remember the lines.
We're still not there. We're almost there. Come on, Dick. You got to sit down there. You're an esteemed speaker, but you got to sit. Okay. We didn't quite finish the first group of speakers about Peter as an adventurer. Our first speaker is Phil Moritz, Peter's friend and dentist. Phil owned the Rocket Science, an obscenely fast sailboat that he decided to take across the North Atlantic. Peter, along with Scott Hurlburt, who we will hear from later, created the website for that voyage, for the Rocket Science voyage. I have no idea if Phil is going to talk about the Rocket Science, but it is a really cool website. Phil Moritz.
Hey guys. Bud's told me he's going to take a shepherd's crook if I'm too long, because we've gone over already. So I'm going to just kind of read what I've just written about Peter as he crossed the Atlantic. And, you know, because he was such a planner, we spent all winter basically organizing this along with Scott. And that helped. Anyway, obviously, as we know, Peter is one of the most amazing and accomplished people we'll ever know. And he did so many things so well with his expertise and perception of handling disaster situations or potentially ones. that went beyond what might expect. He had no offshore sailing experience, but he volunteered to help us crossing the North Atlantic from Providence, Rhode Island to Crosshaven, which was done in 11 days. Anyway, on the second night off the coast of Newfoundland, I'd asked Peter to serve watch with a married couple from Washington. They were pretty insistent that they serve watch together. They had actually built the boat and had a huge offshore resume, but I just really wasn't so comfortable, so I asked Peter if he wouldn't mind staying with him at least for the first night. Lisa and I lay down forward to go to sleep. It was the first time I'd slept in a day and a half, which isn't untypical for being in the ocean anyway. And we were awakened by Peter, who asked me to come topside. As I moved aft in my skivvies quickly, he briefed me that the couple was in a frenzy and believed that we were being chased by something. They didn't know what it was, and that the boat steering was locked and it was going in circles and he couldn't correct it. Well, Peter, as you could figure out, it pretty much assessed all this, but he was also such a diplomat, which he didn't really want to affect the people's self-worth or their image of themselves, so he got me to do it. So we emerged topside, which probably didn't take but 5 seconds, and we see enormous stern light and a superstructure on our stern by about 100 yards or so, so it obviously had just passed right on our beam on a collision course. Well, that sort of explained the chasing, because all they could see in the fog was a radar. And on a radar, if you're on a collision course going side by side, all you get is a great big circle around the boat. And that's all they were doing. The good news is they put their books down to see that they were on something was wrong. As far as the boat going in circle, it was, because they had locked the helm over, so I asked for them to, if they wouldn't mind giving me the helm. We straightened the boat out, and then I had to decide what to do with them. And my choice was Halifax, which was 30, could have thrown them over, was sending them to Halifax, which was only about 30 miles away, but I thought, that's such a bad thing. We don't really have to have them. So I asked Peter to reciprocate and asked him if he would actually be chief of the watch and be with him. Well, he did. And as you might imagine, even though he didn't have too much experience, he gained it quickly, as he did in everything. And on several occasions, if not many occasions, Lisa would wake up after a couple hours to do our watch, and the boat would be surfing between 16 and 24 knots. And it just, you have to understand, for a boat that size to be surfing, it makes strange sounds, it vibrates, and it just feels different. And I'd never surfed the boat, though of course we knew that that's what it should do in certain courses. Well, we'd go topside, and there's Peter with the biggest shit-eating grin you've ever seen, just crashing this boat along at this huge speed that I've never seen, and that's how the whole trip went. And that was Peter. But I was going to say, if there's anything else, I'm sorry, I've got the second page of this. What we learned was really out of this whole thing that Peter's ability to manage people and to do it so carefully and helpfully made these people feel great about their trip. But it was interesting, for all he did, we were never able to reciprocate. Peter always seemed to be a step ahead and doing more than you could ever possibly do for him. But that was the amazing Peter. And that's it.
Thank you, Phil. Next, John Green, who is Peter's nephew from Strikersville, New York, will talk about Peter on behalf of his family. John.
Okay, John.
Thanks. Can everybody hear me? Yeah. Am I really talking to this? What? I'm not going to talk into this.
The market.
I don't do well with this. Anyways, I've known Peter for 45 years. And awesome person. Totally awesome. And my family, I want to say thank you for everything you guys did. And it's just really awesome. So, yeah. I think I got stories, though. You guys want to hear the stories? Yeah? Okay. Well, first of all, Pete, doing tricks on people. You guys haven't noticed that. I must have been between 8 and 10 years old. And so he always took me on things. And, Johnny, come on, let's go do something. And I'm like, okay, no problem. So the one time, he goes, your mom said that you have a situation getting into the wrong places at the wrong time. And I'm like, yeah. He goes, what's this deal with the poison oak and poison ivy? Well, I get into it and I get, it gets pretty nasty. He goes, well, let's go and, teach you of the plant. I'm like, okay. So he takes me and, John, this is poison oak, He goes, you got to be really careful this stuff. It can be really nasty. There's oil on it. The way you can tell I had some free leaves, blah, 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 and the berries, whatever. So he proceeds to take this leaf and starts wiping on it. And I'm like, dude, what are you doing? So he goes, well, I want to show you what it does. So he wipes it on my arm, wipes it on my face, wipes it on my neck, wipes it on my legs and all that. Okay, so he goes, well, that's what happens. I'm like, okay, no problem. And I'm like, well, I want to get the stuff off. He says, okay, well, come on over here. And he goes, we'll get the stuff off. So he grabs mud and he proceeds to wipe it on me, all the places. And he goes, yeah, that should work. I'm like, okay. So he's like, oh my God, you're starting to break out. So he grabs me. We go down into Dick's bedroom and grabs calamine lotion and proceeds to just gobs it on me. So I'm like, oh, jeez. So he goes, no, I don't think that's going to work, man. He goes, man, you're going to break out. And I'm like, oh, jeez. I'm like, I don't want this. I don't want it. So he goes, oh, jeez, come on. So he grabs me, go to, I can't remember. I don't know if it was a creek or a pond, lake. I don't know what the hell it was. So he just grabs me, throws me in, and I'm washing all the stuff off. He goes, man, you're starting to break out. And so I get out, and he goes, I'm just kidding with you. I'm like, man. So I'm a little toad head with dirt and mud, calamine lotion all over me. So that was one time. So the second time, and what I can remember, it was the same week, 2 weeks or whatever, up in Santa Cruz, and so we were in the middle of moving up to the Santa Cruz Mountains, helping Uncle Pete move up there. So we go, and there's a swing on the edge of this road, this dirt road. And he goes, oh, geez, Johnny, we're going to have to go on that swing. And I'm like, okay, swing, So, we helped Uncle Pete unpack his stuff in this little tiny cabin. I mean, it was small. So we get everything unpacked and everything, and it was almost supper time, and Uncle Pete goes, "Come on, Johnny, let's go on that swing." And I'm like, okay. So there's this rope, and I'm saying it was probably between an inch to 2 inches diameter, and it was really super long. And the board on the swing was probably about the size of this board to sit on. So Uncle Pete gets on the board and everything, and Kasumbo's like, wagging his tail, looking at us, watching us and everything. And he goes, "Okay, Johnny, jump on my lap." I'm like, "Okay." So I jump on his lap, and I remember Uncle Pete just rolling back as far as he can, and then he goes, "Okay, here we go," and he kicks off, and the thing he screams out is, "Kasumbo!" And we run across this valley, and I'm looking down, and it's just like, it was like 5,000 feet down. He's going, "Aren't you having a good time?" No! Swinging back and forth, and he's like, "All right." He goes, "Man, it'll really suck if we start slowing down." So he has this like straight out, and we're just swinging back and forth, and the thing starts to slow down, of course. So it comes to a dead stop. So I'm sitting on Uncle Pete's lap, and we're hanging straight down, looking straight down this valley. And he goes, "Geez, John, what are we going to do?" Well, you're the adult. I'm a child. Think about it. So he proceeds to, bust my chops, and he goes, "Geez, John, I think there's a rope behind you, or behind me. Why don't you grab it, see if you can pull it?" And I'm going, "Okay." So I reach behind him and grab this little tiny piece of rope, and I'm pulling on this piece of rope, and I thought I was doing really good. I'm like, "Cool, pulling." Well, he's proceeding, he's kicking his legs to, go back and forth. So we finally get back, and he goes, "Okay, Johnny, jump." Jump? He goes, "Just jump, come on, geez. We took it all day, just jump." So I'm like, "Okay." So, jumping, I thought it was like, 50, 100 feet. I don't know. So I jump. Hit the ground, and he's like, "Okay, we're done." And I'm like, "Cool." So I get up to the trail, and Pete finally gets up to the trail, and he goes, "Wasn't that great?" And I'm going, so he always told me, he goes, "Always do what your heart tells you." So it's all good. It's all good. So, and he loved all of you guys. All of you. So, hey, God bless, man.
Thank you, John.
Hey, you're welcome.
Thanks to the family. The next speaker brings us to the part of the program we thought we'd be to right after dinner. Sorry, we got a little behind. It's a little bit about Peter's professional life, which was real important to him. Peter's work in the Peace Corps in Colombia and with migrant farm workers with Cesar Chavez in California showed a deep and an abiding commitment to betterment of the lives of the rural poor. That commitment continued for almost 3 decades of work with the Department of Community and Regional Affairs in Alaska. A co-worker for almost all of that period, Peter Freer, will talk to us about Peter's work and that commitment. Peter?
Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. I'm going to do that John did and speak without the microphone.
Thank you.
Well, I didn't want you to be alone in this. I was very lucky to work with Peter for almost 20 years, from 1985 to 2003. At the Department of Community and Regional Affairs, and most of those years were in the Southeast Regional Office. And I'd say that coming from the background that he did, the department in those days was a natural fit for Peter with his background in rural development. It was an agency that reached out to help programs to help communities, I should say, through programs and direct assistance. And I'll just run through a little of this today. This could be a little bit of a dry speech.
We'll take it.
Thank you, Nancy. Peter worked extensively with communities through the Alaska Coastal Management Program, now deceased, where he became well known as both a community advocate and a problem solver. And many local officials who worked with Peter during those years, officials like John Bowling and Craig, Marlene Campbell in Sitka, Bob Pinard in Hoonah, Ginny Tierney in Thorn Bay, and others can attest to the commitment that Peter had to the best interests of coastal districts and small communities. He was instrumental in improving and expanding the division's community mapping program, working closely with communities and land managers and multiple agencies to develop up-to-date map sets of towns and villages. George Plumley and Keith Jost in our Anchorage office can attest to the quality of Peter's ideas, his purposefulness, and his determination, which I think we've learned today were characteristics that went through all facets of Peter's life. And I think today we have some coastal program people in the audience. I saw Gretchen Kaiser here and Carrie Howard, and I'm probably missing somebody, I'm sure. He was instrumental in preparing publications on subjects that included rural sanitation, community planning, native land claims, land reconveyances, capital projects, election procedures, a project that he did with Gina, and grants administration. And Peter set high standards for everything he did in my association with him as a co-worker. And in doing so, he raised everyone's level of effort around him. He had a commitment to fundamentals in every single project that he approached. Peter also took what I would call a triage approach to our clients in small communities and unincorporated towns. He helped those mayors and local officials first who were earnest and realistic in their efforts to promote community development, but really needed a hand to do it, who needed an advocate, someone to be with them. He kept a careful eye on the successful, knowing that they could probably keep themselves going, but needed, maybe a touch from time to time. And he just didn't pay attention to the insincere. Richard Peterson, who was the youngest mayor in the state at age 22 in Kasan in 1996, and is now the executive director of the Tlingit-Haida Central Council, can attest to the importance of Peter's counsel when he was a young mayor almost 20 years ago. Richard and many others throughout the course of Peter's career were grateful to count him as their ally. Peter never suffered fools, whoever they were. Always cordial, unfailingly polite, Peter would always just ignore the people that wasted his time. And he stood for his co-workers. As longtime co-worker and friend Bill Rolfson said, we always knew that Peter had our back. Friend and former co-worker Gina Shirey, who was here, has described him as a strong community advocate who always listened before he acted, and as someone who reached out generously to help. And I think there were other old DCRA colleagues here today, Tom Lane, Bob Sylvester, Josie Banke, Ira Winograd, and others who can attest to that characteristic of Peter. And he went all in, too, when he committed to a project. And here's a good example. Peter and I worked with the city of Port Alexander for almost 2 years writing a land use code, zoning ordinance, after Paul Young and other local residents became concerned over the possible development of a destination-style resort lodge in Port Alexander. I mean, what a concept. Zoning in a town that's half libertarian and half communitarian. It was quite an effort. And looking back, I think really it was a personal challenge to Peter to complete this project. We traveled repeatedly to Port Alexander and met over and over again with community leaders, council members, fishermen, everybody. PA is only about 60 people, so I think we talked to everybody 2 or 3 times. And the thing was that Peter always listened carefully, and he always picked up the beat behind the words. And with that, we were able to write an ordinance that the city council in this remote, freedom-based little community adopted. Now there were some problems after that, but I won't. That's for another day. Another thing about Peter that was wonderful as a coworker was how collaborative Peter was, and we frequently took a team approach to our projects and our assignments, and these are really among my best memories of working with Peter. Sitting down as a staff and talking through a community problem or a community issue, a regional or statewide policy matter, or scoping out the contents of a handbook or a desk book or a guidebook. In those days, we felt empowered at the department when we began to work together 20 years ago. And maybe it was at that time just the afterglow of the Hammond administration, but we had a lot of room to make our own decisions about work assignments and priorities. We brainstormed and wrote manuals for small town mayors, for city councils, city clerks, nonprofit community associations, and grant applicants. We prioritized our own work assignments and our travel and the type and scope of assistance that we provided to communities. We talked to each other all the time, and we solved things among ourselves. We felt like we were in charge. It suited Peter, that work, that atmosphere of work. And it's what I remember most about working with him. Peter, he was the kind of person that everybody wants on their side. The person who makes everyone around him better. We were very fortunate to have had him as a colleague and to have known him as a friend. So, farewell, Peter.
Thank you, Peter. When Peter McKay moved to Antioch, Scott Hurlburt, our next speaker, was a high school student at that town. He got to know Peter well, but not as a co-adventurer. By the way, with regard to that, Scott said, I'd lived for 10 years in tents, I didn't need to do any more of that. Not as a co-adventurer, and not really as an observer of Peter's life work in rural Alaska. I think of Scott as Peter's IT guy over the years, curating his audio and his video collections, advising him on all things technical, and becoming one of Peter's closest confidants. They had a unique relationship, and Scott has insights into Peter's life that reflect that unique relationship. As belies Scott's profession, his presentation will be multimedia. He's going to have some video, he's going to have a lot of audio, he's going to have a slide presentation at the end. In between, he's going to talk. The presentation is not only multimedia, but it may be R-rated. Scott?
Thank you.
I'm on the phone with Peter one night, and I ask what I think is a rhetorical question. Peter, who's your best friend? And I pause long enough for him to tell me that it's me, and he says, Bud Carpenetti. And I say, what are you talking about? It's 2 a.m., I'm on the phone with you right now, where's Bud? And he says to me, yeah, but Bud's a great guy. He went to Stanford. So Antioch High School's not good enough for you anymore? He's a big lawyer. And I said, you mean a big liar? He's got a wonderful wife and kids. And I said, well, I have a dog. I said, I live in San Francisco, the greatest city in the world. And he said, Bud's family's a legend in San Francisco. Whatever, man. Whatever. I quit talking to him. I forget what I wanted to say to him at that time. I just remember that conversation happened.
Scott previewed this speech for me yesterday. I did not.
So I'm going to play a video now. Give me just a moment to see if I can mess it up. I hope the audio works. Yeah, that's great. All right.
We should say something with like a holiday theme or something. You're just something quick and keep going. Is Bill doing it well? I mean, he knows her all right. Does Bill's wife know it well? That's not good there. Wait, I know what we'll say. Live from Anchorage. It's Saturday night.
Stay. Stay. Stay.
Watch him send the dog to corral this sheep in just a sec.
Northwest 10. Seawater temperature 52. Combined. You doing okay, Jim? Yeah. Sparkling buoy 53. Seawater temperature 54. Combined.
Back in the day, like in 83 or something like that, we went to Glacier Bay and I had husband and wife team from Anchorage and John Finley, who was a cardiologist in Anchorage. 5 of us on this boat for 2 weeks.
For 2 weeks? That's a lot.
Crystal friends?
Pressure 1,030. Jim, you want me to paddle over and get the raft? How are you going to sit down, Jim? No, that's those. Tell us about those pants, how good they are. Jeez. Huh? Jim, I can do it for you. Or so.
I just have to get my feet. Like that.
Now you got to get your ass down quick. Right? Oh, Jesus.
How'd you like to try to do this out in the ocean?
Can you bend your knees?
Okay, I don't know if I can get in here.
No.
What you could probably do is get in the boat and then do a porpoise, do a sea lion. Shoot off.
Yeah, right.
I could do this if you weren't. You didn't have that goddamn camera. That's a quick video on you. That's it. Beautiful. God, what a maneuver. Nice move, Jim. All right.
Control panel, Peter's MG. So here's the $300 steering wheel. So here we go. We're off. We're in traffic.
This is Apocalypse Now to the smell of a skunk.
Victory. And action. What's wrong with skunk anyway? I like the smell of skunk.
Watch Peter give a little extra act right here. Right at the end, he sort of sells it.
Awesome song. Turn this up. Up, by the way. No, it's not. Not even one half the way up. Hey, we'll edit this shit out later. Okay, Scott. Go like that. Ready to get there? Yeah, too close. Guys watching.
Good, I'm glad everyone enjoyed that.
That was great, Scott.
So let me, we got one more clip for you. And hold on. This one's very short. Sorry. Stand by. I'm gonna start it again here. I did this like 1,000 times in practice. Stand by 1 second.
Heat and cold, its schooners, islands, and maroons and buccaneers and buried gold, and all the old romance retold exactly in the ancient way, and please as me they pleased of old, the wiser youngsters of today. So be it. And all on.
Thanks for your indulgence there. That poem starts out the book Treasure Island. And when we built the rocket science site, Peter called me up and said, hey, there's this great opening to Treasure Island, and you've got to go find it. So when you go to Peter's page on his on rocket science, that's what comes up. And so I wanted to make sure everyone saw that. Give me just a second to get reset here. So that's the poem. If tales to sailors' tunes, storm and adventure, heat and cold. And he just really liked that. So in 2006, Peter and the crew set out across the Atlantic in the boat, the Rocket Science. And we built the website to go with the adventure. The whole thing was Peter's idea and my web skills. He called me one day and said, I got an idea, something that we could do for the trip. And I loved it. It kept friends and family informed. Peter suggested we add a crew manifest and went around collecting personal stories to put on each person's crew member page. And when he got to his own, he said, go find that clip. The audio from this clip plays when you go to Peter's page every single time, and he just loved it. It was something from when he was a little kid. But I think Peter was an adventurer more than a pirate, although he had a little swashbuckler spirit. I never went with Peter on any of his rowing trips. You guys have told those stories much better. But for me, the spirit of Peter was alive in an incident that happened in 1996. I had some treasure stolen and held captive in South Carolina. And let me tell you, storm clouds and high seas were brewing in my life, and Peter understood. I told Peter, I have a key to where the treasures are being hidden, and I'm going to South Carolina to get them back. It's risky, dangerous, and must be done in total secret. And Peter gave me a pirate smirk and just said, I'll go pack. We flew immediately to Washington, D.C., rented a car, drove to South Carolina, and under the cover of darkness at the stroke of midnight, in complete silence and secrecy, we made our move. The hideout was empty and unlocked. I snuck in, grabbed my treasure, and we pointed the car north and sped away. I'll never forget that ride. We were giddy with the excitement and sense of adventure that I've only experienced a few times. Life had tested me and I'd tested our friendship, and we returned legends. But of course, we didn't tell anybody. The return of my items changed the course of that challenge, and Peter had earned a sailor's loyalty from me that day. And we spoke about that adventure on our last phone call before he died, and I'll remember it until I die. Peter kept the memory of our friends who had passed away alive. And one of the most important people in Peter's life was John Hale. And I know many people in this room knew John, but for those who didn't, it's no exaggeration to describe John as larger than life. John had a commanding presence that drew everyone in and made even his enemies love him. Peter moved to Alaska and somehow ended up in Antioch as John Hale's right-hand man, working at the city office. And I wish I had a photo from those days, but I don't. They made a perfect team because John would have some wild and crazy and possibly tangled idea that was perfect. And Peter would spend months and months making it actually come to life. It was working for John that Peter really learned how to write a grant and get projects approved. And in a very real sense, John brought Peter in from the field work so that he could have a long and valuable career with the state of Alaska, doing work in the service of community after community. When John died, Peter realized that he had become the keeper of John Hale's legacy. So had Nan Elliott, Bill Spear, Jeff McTaz, and so many of the others that loved John. The crazy part is it was John who taught us how to do it. There was no better poet at keeping the dead alive than John Hale. If you rattled John's cage even a little bit, out would come the words of a dead man like a performance at the Greek theater. His voice lifted so that all could hear with all the gravitas of a great actor. And if you knew John and you knew Peter, then you knew Peter was keeping him alive. Scotty Hurlburt, that poor bastard. Peter loved this because it was John Haleism. Everybody, all the men anyway, were poor bastards. Let's be careful out there. They stole that from Hill Street Blues. And they used to steal the keys from me to break into the Antioch Elementary School and watch it on RatNet. Peter would be talking about some argument at work and say, "Yeah, I had to let loose on that poor bastard with a hailstorm." A hailstorm is a long, loud, and ranting diatribe ending with a perspective-based summary and a friendly chuckle. A proper hailstorm should have as much swearing, poetry, faux anger, and very real passion as one can muster. And it was a specialty of John Hale. And among his friends and colleagues, they were known as Hailstorm. Peter, in his own way, had mastered the technique. I had many hailstorms pointed my direction. Peter and I were brothers in the family of people that looked up to John like a father, and John knew it, and it was important to him. When I used to bitch about my dad to Peter, he'd launch into a poem called "This Be the Verse." When I asked him where he learned it, Peter would laugh and say, every time I bitched about my family, no offense, John Hale would launch into this poem. I'm going to move this over to the other screen so you can see it. Sorry for the bad words. They fuck you up, your mom and dad. They may not mean to, but they do. They fill you with the faults they had and add some extra just for you. They were fucked up in their turn by fools in old-style hats and coats who half the time were soppy stern and half at one another's throats. Manhattan's misery on to man deepens like a coastal shelf. Get out as early as you can and don't have any kids yourself. I must say, though, that Peter loved kids, and he always pulled his punch on that last line, so I don't really think he believed that. But the way he said it, you could tell it was from John Hale. He'd be imitating John's voice. He'd say it real fast. It was beautiful. I wish I'd have recorded it. Peter found a way to have things that made his friendships with each of us unique. And my friendship was not the same as yours. For Peter and I, we did a lot of stuff with entertainment, media, music, photography, movies, computers. One of our favorite TV shows was the Trailer Park Boys. Stand by one second. If you're not familiar with the show, it's self-described as being about a bunch of recidivist assholes living in a trailer park, growing dope and taking turns being in and out of con college, their term for jail. We used to make relentless comparisons to characters from the bush, places like Bethel and Antioch where Peter and I met. And who reminded us most of Ricky, Julian, and Bubbles? I suspect that this bond with Peter was unique to me. It was just too stupid of a way to spend time for anyone but the Peter Scott combo. But it fit us perfectly. We watched dozens of episodes of Trailer Park Boys and other TV shows together over the phone. Movies, too. We'd both get them ready on our respective ends to press play so that we could watch them in sync. And one of us would start to do a countdown. 3, 2, 1. One of our greatest running jokes was from the movie Lethal Weapon, where they have this long discussion about the countdown. Wait. Is it 3, 2, 1 and then go? Or is it 3, 2 and go on 1? We simply could not do a countdown the first time without busting out laughing at who was going to shout, wait, so we could discuss the protocol. Many of these episodes would just end with us laughing, the original countdown long forgotten. When someone would remember, he'd say, okay, hey, let's watch this movie, let's do it. 3, 2, 1, and before the 1 could come out, there'd be nothing on the phone but hysterical laughter. A countdown impossible. Oh, sorry, hold on. My little media thing here is all messed up. Peter lived in Santa Cruz before he lived in Alaska, and he loved KPIG radio. It's Americana at its finest. And Peter loved things in the modern world that have been able to keep their uniqueness despite commercialism. And KPIG does this. It reminded him of Santa Cruz and his life in California before Alaska. And he used to listen to it for hours over the internet. One year for Christmas, I gave him a subscription when they started charging for streaming. And the music is heavily influenced by shit kicker music, but it's diverse and reflects all musical tastes. And Santa Cruz and Juneau are similar in that way, and I believe that's why Peter found his way to Juneau. Around the turn of the century, Peter fell in love with the movie Buena Vista Social Club. He saw it several times. He used to buy the DVD and give it out as a gift, and he loved the spirit of old-timers, keeping their heritage alive through performance rather than recordings. He even went to Cuba because of the movie, and the song you're hearing now is a particular favorite. Whether it was the Ry Cooder or the Charlie Musselwhite version, I'm not sure what he preferred. But more than once I answered the phone and all I could hear would be this song blasting across long distance. You know, the other end, Peter was either shouting Spanish or overemphasizing the title chant of Chan Chan. Another song that Peter loved to sing over the phone was this one. He loved that line, Vato. Hey baby, get my soul. Please don't leave me this anymore. Come on, baby. So Peter and I had what could best be described as a 32-year-long phone call. Maybe I wasn't the only one. We would answer the phone mid-sentence and pick up where the last call had ended. And by the way, trust me, if you do this with your other friends, it really messes with their head. 32 years ago, the cost of this was enormous, and our employers paid the bulk of this cost. Peter often referred to our phone calls to one boss or another, sorry Peter, as computer support calls. It got so bad that someone at the state of Alaska sent him a bill for $800. And he negotiated it down to $400 and paid it. Lucky for us, this coincided with the internet, and we were strong and early adopters. We used See You, See Me before Skype, and Skype before there was Google Hangouts and everything else that came in between. We kept the call going. When we weren't on the phone, we were emailing and messaging. It broke my heart while I was preparing this memorial when one of Peter's Facebook friends told me that for 4 years Peter was her only friend, that he had set up her Facebook account just so they could stay in touch. But that was Peter, and he knew you needed technology to bridge the great distances of the modern world and life in Alaska. As far back as 1980, we got email accounts with the University of Alaska, and on more than one semester, we signed up for classes, got computer accounts, then dropped the classes on the last possible day for a refund. And this gave us email for 6 months before the university caught up with its paperwork. During the mid-2000s, it became clear to us that the technology was developing so that we might just keep an open line between our two apartments. We never did that because we found other ways to saturate our communication, but we did spend hours and hours with each other just on the speakerphone as we worked on one project or another. When we talked, we had codes, inside jokes and movie references and shorthand for almost everything. The carrots are in the pot meant that I had dropped a package in the mail and he should expect it in a few days. I got more than one text message that simply read, "The carrots are cooked," indicating that he had gotten the package. Peter thought it was funny that I'd started smoking pot again because I can't drink anymore. One day on the phone he says to me, "So, did you do anything with those bicycle tires last night?" And we didn't miss a beat. No explanation. Forevermore, pot was known as bicycle tires. We weren't afraid of getting caught or anything like that. We were hiding our actions because it made it more fun. And anyone listening on the line, well, they could fuck off. I was really pushing Peter hard to leave Alaska, just because he's getting old. But he was one of the few people who actually loved Alaska the way it should be loved, to enjoy the wilderness and not exploit it. You see it in the photos of Peter, and those of you that went on his adventures know what I'm talking about. Peter was hard to take a photograph of because he preferred to be photographed walking away from the camera, like so many photos of the great John Muir. He wanted to give you the sense that the adventure was out there, not here. And when I asked him to pose, he'd often over-exaggerate the pose, creating a mannequin-like effect. Of course, we thought this was hilarious. Walk in front of the camera with Peter around, and out would come the line from Coppola's cameo scene in Apocalypse Now, and Peter would shout, "Don't look at the camera, don't look at the camera, keep moving." We loved that joke, and you saw it in the video. Peter, 1 second, please. Hey, baby. Peter, and I took photos around his apartment, and to Peter, if you were pointing off to the horizon like an explorer, pointing the way, then the photo was acceptable. He could even get you to do it. Peter considered it one of his greatest visual puns, though he had several that I know about. The look away, the walk back, the fake about to say something. These were all visual puns that Peter loved to pull on the unsuspecting photographer, and in my case, suspecting. Ask Peter for a selfie, and you should consider the possibility that it would be NSFW, just to prove the point. And I think I have a visual here. That's just a loose collection of explorer points. Peter loved movies, and many of you may have been his companions for the critically acclaimed movies, but that was not my role. Peter and I were crazy fans of movies like Apocalypse Now, Blade Runner, The Thing, Alien. Most people can quote lines from those movies, and so could we, but Peter liked the lines that nobody quoted but that everyone knows. In Blade Runner, it was, "Stop right where you are, pal. If you're not cop, you're little people. And you not come here. Illegal." Or the chilling realization made by Deckard himself, "Implants? You're talking about memories." Those phrases echoed through our conversations like a shorthand. Every time I recalled something from Antioch 20 years earlier, Peter would ask me if those memories were mine or Tyrell's nieces. To which I would say something equally stupid like, "Tyrell? He big boss, big genius. He designed your brain." At some point during the fall, one of us would sigh and echo Kurt Russell from The Thing with the shake of the head and a low voice. First goddamn week of winter. Many of the albums that Peter loved were the soundtracks to our favorite films. Blade Runner was a constant, often used by both of us as the music we fell asleep to. I asked Peter what he did if he didn't have the soundtrack around. He said, "Funny you should ask. I've been putting the movie on and going to sleep." Yeah. There you go. Nice. That's a good one. He's probably trying to talk you into doing it too, or are you doing it too there? When Run Lola Run came out, Peter was hooked. Its soundtrack is a retro disco Eurotrash beat, touched a nerve, and he was enthralled. Blasting over the phone at full volume, a favor which I could never return because my neighbors were always right next door. Peter loved MST3K, the show from the 90s where they watch bad movies and make fun of them. One of Peter's favorite actors was Bill Murray, and in The Life Aquatic they make great fun of the Explorer Point, so I always think of Peter when I watch it. If Peter had a religion, it was captured in the Bill Murray movie The Razor's Edge, and I hear they're going to make a book out of that movie. Lost in Translation deals with knowing that you're running out of time, and Sofia Coppola does a brilliant job of capturing the bittersweetness of being past your prime. Whenever I referred to the future, Peter would comment that he doubted he would make it that far. Blade Runner starts by setting the stage with a title card that reads Los Angeles, November 2019, just 5 years from now. I always thought that Peter and I would be on the phone together that day, discussing the whereabouts of Deckard and Rachel and talking about whatever stupid shit was funniest to us then. Peter and I talked a lot about death and dying, not morbid, more curiously. There's a line from Blade Runner about death that Peter really loved. Rutger Hauer's character knows he's going to die, and he says all those moments will be lost, like tears in the rain. I'm going to leave you with a few photos I found of Peter. Some are mine, some are yours. Some are people that couldn't be here, and they span the ages. You've seen some of them already. I tried to limit the number of shots of Meg the dog, but he really loved her, and about every third photo is her. Give me just a second to start it. And I want to also display it behind us, so I'm going to give this a try. Okay. So this goes fairly fast, and I'll put on the longer version later, but for now I'm just going to let this run. So one of Peter's favorite folk music performers was Israel, or is as he was called. And this is one of his songs.
Okay, this one's for Gabby. really do come true. Someday wish upon a star, wake up where the clouds are far behind. Be where trouble melts like lemon drops, high above the chimney top. That's where you find me, oh, somewhere over the rainbow. Bluebirds fly, and the dream that you dare to, oh why can't I? Well, I see trees of Greenland, red roses too. I watch them bloom for me and you, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Well, I see skies of blue, and I see clouds of white and the brightness of day. I like the dark, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people passing by. I see friends shaking hands, singing, how do you do? They really say, I love you. I hear babies cry, and I watch them go. They'll learn much more than we'll know, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Someday wish upon a star, wake up where the clouds are far behind. Be where trouble melts like a lemon drops, high above the chimney top. That's where you find me, oh, somewhere over the rainbow, way up high. The dream that you dare to, why, oh why can't I?
Thanks.
I guess we knew that Scott wasn't going to make it easy on us. Thank you, Scott. That was incredibly beautiful. So if there's a light in here, I can't read what I was going to say. No offense, John. Thank you, John. Nan Elliott is Alaska's premier chronicler of what I think of as the Alaskan spirit as found in iconic Alaskan characters. Her book, I'd Trade My Old Skidoo for You, remains, in my opinion, the best of its kind. As fun to read now as when it came out, I don't know, decades ago. A secret pride of mine for a long time was that I knew all three of the Juneau people that were featured in it, Bill Spear and Laurie Berg and Peter McKay. It was after a while that I realized Juneau's such a small town that probably everybody in the town knew those three people. But I still thought it was really cool to know them. And it's not surprising at all that Peter McKay was one of those three. And fortunately for us, Nan Elliott is here to share her observations of our remarkable friend. Nan is our last speaker that's on the program, and after that I hope that anyone in the room that would like to come up and share memories of Peter will do so. So, Nan, I've lost track of where everyone is.
Last night at 5 o'clock, your esteemed honor called me and said that he asked me if I would do, as he put it, the grand finale. I tried to weasel my way out of that. I said, I don't lend that same gravitas that you would as the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. I'm just a short person. I'm better on the open mic. Scotty, as the Scots would say, and I've had a wee dram of scotch, you did a brawly job, laddie. You did a brawly job. And there's no way I can say more. At this point, I feel like Peter would be looking at that watch that was the latest incarnation of a rocket to the moon, that could do just about anything except do your taxes. And he'd say, yeah, Nan, we got to get out of here. Hurry up. I got to get out of here. You know, the tide's coming up. So bless you all. Well, I think that I had things I was going to say, but that was so beautifully done. Thank you very much, really. You had tears everywhere.
Thank you, Nan. This is the time that we had for an open mic, and I know there's a lot of people that know a lot of things about Peter and would love to hear any observations or any stories that anyone has.
I don't have a story, but I would like to.
Microphone is optional, that's been established, but
Mic is okay. For those of you that I have not met, I'm Peter's sister, one of the two that are here today, and I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. You have shared a tribute about my brother that nobody other than the people that he loved and that loved him could have done. It was beautiful. You made Peter alive here today, and he will continue to live in your hearts. You know, it's kind of fun, as his older sister, I might add. I kind of live vicariously through Peter's adventures. And many times I thought, oh my goodness, it's just scary, the things he does. And when he took that trip across the Atlantic, I followed that on rocket science, and I thought, oh goodness, is he ever going to come back? But he lived and did the things he loves to do, and he did it with the people that he loves. You have brought him alive to me, because it's been a long time. In the spring of this year, I had the pleasure of meeting him at the airport in Atlanta on his way to Belgium. We talked nonstop for 3 hours. Neither one of us, I think, when we left there, left anything unsaid. And he told me of the things that he loved, the ranch in Montana, the people up here, all of you. And now your names have come to life for my husband and my son and I thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you, Barbara. Joe Geldhof's got his hand up. You got a big voice, Joe, but you can come up here too if you'd like.
P.J. McKay, great guy, good life, well lived. I was talking with Carla Hart and Annie Carpinetti, and the one thing that we know about Peter, among many things, he loved to row. And Peter was all about he was about a lot of things, but community was huge in his life. And in order to keep Peter's sense of what's good in life going, Annie and Carl and I have set up a little ad hoc group, and we're open to all kinds of ideas, but we think we should really do right by Peter McKay and set up a rowing clubhouse. It'll be somewhere in Juneau. He was originally a Western New York guy, and there's actually a Frank Lloyd Wright boathouse that was designed and never built. And we'll see if we can get the plans, and maybe we can use those. Maybe we'll come up with something more indigenous. But somewhere in the city and borough, there should be a Peter McKay boathouse. And Corinne Geldhof and I will put the first $1,000 down through the Juneau Community Fund, which is the nonprofit. We don't have to create another organization. We'll use that. But I think Peter would like it if we remember him with a structure, and it's a small token, but let's do something to encourage the kind of community development for Peter through a boathouse. And you'll hear more about that. We're not in love with the boathouse. Maybe it'll take on some different thing. This is Juneau after all, and we'll have to go through the process and everything. But somewhere in this community there should be something to remember Peter. And Annie Carpinetti and Carla Hart and I will be the first iteration of the group that'll do something to remember Peter going forward, so that we remember his legacy throughout the state and for everybody. So.
Joe, I hope you get that done for Peter. That would be fantastic. And I had a similar thought. The last thing that Peter was working on out in Gustavus for that community was to get a bike path built that goes from downtown to the park. And I live in California now, so I'm probably the wrong person to speak for the idea, not being Alaskan. And being an actual Alaskan, I know how much that means. But if there was any way that could be called the Peter McKay Trail, I think that would be perfect. So I just wanted to plant the idea, and if anyone can do anything to forward that idea, run with it.
Those are both great ideas. Anyone else? Teresa?
Yeah, I have a great idea.
Teresa.
Yeah. I think I'm pretty much done crying. What was that? Can you hear me? Oh, God. I think I'm done crying because of those bagpipes, but feel free to cry. We've got the poster project going on. I personally have the poster project going on. I know it was a thing for me in the beginning, but what I would really like to have done before all of you leave is, if you haven't taken down a postcard, written something on it, and signed your name, please do so before you leave, because what Nancy and I plan to do with that is we're going to digitize it, well, for ourselves. But if anybody else wants it, we'll certainly pass it on. I'll probably put it on his Facebook page. For those of you not on his Facebook page, I'd be happy to email it to you. But the original will go to his family. I would like to give it to Julia because, or John Green, or you guys work it out, the original with the postcards, because you're the names I knew. So just want to say that. If you haven't done the postcard, it's in there. There's plenty of time.
Thanks, Teresa, for that reminder. I don't mean to suggest that there aren't going to be other people to say things, but I wanted to say something before we got to the end, and maybe now is a good time to do it, and that is I want to thank all of the people who came together to make this remembrance and celebration possible. I'm inevitably going to overlook someone, but I don't think that's a good excuse not to try to name the ones that I can think of. And so Nicole Grew and Jeff Sauer oversaw this whole venture. Teresa Svankara, fed hordes of people on several occasions out at Jeff and Teresa's place. Teresa Scott put together the postcards for Peter. Scott Hurlburt organized all the electrons needed for the audio-video presentations, the microphone, everything else, and a lot beyond just his offerings. Carla Hart coordinated the food for today. Annie Carpinetti combed through photos to put together the photo boards. Nancy Seamount was kind of the general guru for planning in several areas. Carl Broderson was the videographer. Milt Barker was the quartermaster every meeting that we had when something was needed. Milt just wrote it down on a list and it magically appeared. And you know, talking about people helping and not getting credit for it makes me want to end at least this part of the program with this story. It comes from a lady I don't know named Margaret Hazen at Bartlett Cove in Glacier Bay, and she wrote this, and I'm quoting directly. When I heard the news that Peter had passed away, my first thought was that it couldn't be the Peter McKay that had just been here. I didn't know him well, but I felt I needed to share with you something that this extraordinary man had been doing for the park for many years. Every spring, before and into the permit season, he would head out quietly and alone into the bay and skiff camp. I had to read that several times, but I think it means camp by skiff, skiff camp. He would anchor up and set up a tarp and sleep right in his skiff. He would go out for nearly a week at a time, sometimes coming into Bartlett Cove, dropping off his loot and heading back out for another adventure, hunting for more. His loot being a skiff load of trash from our beaches. He would bring it up the trash to the trash cans and stack it neatly for Dean to pick up on his next rounds. One year, Wayne and I tried to grab all the trash before Dean would get to it and stockpile it in the storage shed so that we could get a picture of the seasonal mountain that Peter brought in. But Dean's too quick and we lost several piles to his quick recovery and we gave up. Some of you may have known him and others not, but we will all miss the kind deeds he had done for the park. Just thought you should know, end quote. And to me, that's just exactly what Peter was about. Working hard for the benefit of other people, keeping the countryside clean, doing a good job, making everything better, not even talking about it, not even letting people know about it. And I just thought that was a great way to end talking about the people that had put this thing together and giving credit where credit is due. So anyway, thanks. Other people, yeah. Anyone else? There's postcards to be filled out and pictures to take.
Signing the family book.
Signing the family book. Please don't forget those things will be really meaningful for the family. And the postcards will be a great guest book list here. Anyone else? Well, thanks everyone for coming. It's been wonderful. So long, Peter.